Hallelujah. Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Hallelujah. The Holy Gospel according to John, the 8th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to the Judeans who had believed in him, "If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered him, "We are descendants of Abraham and have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying you will be made free?" Jesus answered that, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The Son has a place there forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." The Gospel of the Lord. So we've all heard people say it, and maybe we've said it ourselves. A phrase or a sentence that sounds like an ultimatum, that puts us in a corner where we're just not sure how we're going to get out of it. It goes something like this: "I will never again do blank." You know it. "I will never again go to that restaurant. They treated me so shabbily, the food was just awful, it's dirty and filthy, I will never go there again." Or maybe you got so frustrated about the protests of an athletic team that you have simply decided that you will never again watch baseball, football, basketball, hockey, cricket, soccer, whatever it might be. You've just wiped that out. Which means you could probably give up cable right now. It's just gone. Or you've made a statement to your child, or they have said to you, "I will never come out of my room again," which is a really neat trick unless they have a bathroom there. But when we put ourselves in that corner, when we make that kind of ultimatum, and other people hear that, that's the worst part. If you say it yourself, it's one thing, but other people hear it, suddenly you seem stuck. You don't know what to do. Because maybe at some point you hear that the restaurant is really getting better and there's a new chef and everyone's talking about what a wonderful place it is, but you said you're never going back to Le Chez Petit. And now you do want to go. You know, you could put a mask on and go, right? Then they wouldn't recognize you. Or you've been told that the World Series is really exciting, and though you said you're never watching baseball, maybe you could sneak it on your iPad under the blanket. But only you can kind of break out of that, because you're the one who's made the ultimatum. Now, one way to read Paul's statements to the Romans is that God has created an ultimatum. God said that if we sin, we will die. That's the kind of plan. You break the law, there are consequences. You will be held accountable before God. And at one level, we want that to be true, right? We want people to be held accountable for their actions. We don't want things to go nilly-willy. But you have this sense that even as God is setting this sort of parameters of how things are supposed to be, that perhaps God is a little concerned that he might be a little harsh. Because God, in fact, loves humanity. And when he realized that the wages of sin is death seemed to apply to everyone, then there wasn't a lot of humanity left for God to love. And as we know, the person who makes the ultimatum, who declares the sentence, is the only one who can kind of undo it. And so when Paul gets to the point of saying that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, that no one is righteous, he makes those never again kind of statements, and somehow God has to figure out how God can be faithful to what he said, while at the same time resolving the divine dilemma and getting us out of the pickle in which we find ourselves because we haven't done what God asked us to do. And in the 3rd chapter of Romans, which is kind of one of those seminal texts for the Reformation, where Luther suddenly discovered that there was another way than the way that people were trying. Because, people have always tried to figure out a way to sort of placate the divine. Can we pay him off? Can we work harder? Can we sacrifice somebody else? Can we buy indulgences to get ourselves out of the mess? We're always looking for ways to get out, but it's pretty clear, Paul says, there's no solution from your perspective. But God does. And God decides that if no human being can do it, then the human being who is divine, who comes into our world to be the perfect Israelite, the righteous one, he can set things aright. He can undo God's dilemma so that we are no longer bound, but free to live God's life. And Paul uses 3 images to talk about how that works from 3 different sort of areas of life. In the one, he says that we have been justified by God's grace. Now, justification is courtroom language. It's the language that says somebody has received a sentence, and then along comes another who takes that sentence away, who makes the person justified or righteous, who says that what you have been accused of, you don't have to pay the penalty for. It's a courtroom analogy. It's one that many people probably would be delighted in. If you have a fine that needs to be paid, the judge says, yeah, that's been taken care of. That's kind of a nice thing. And so the one analogy he uses is that Jesus comes and takes the fine, takes the penalty from us upon himself. The second image he uses is the word redemption. And you know what it means to redeem. It's what we used to do with green stamps. Remember green stamps way back when? You collected them all, you stuck them in the book, and then you went somewhere. I think I got a bicycle early on in my life from green stamps. But you had to redeem them. You redeemed them and you got something in return. But redemption is often used in situations where somebody's been kidnapped, right? And you have to pay a ransom to redeem them. So Paul says that Jesus is the ransom that redeems us, and the thing that has caught us, of course, the thing that kidnapped us, was sin, death, and the power of the devil. So if you didn't get the court image, now you get the kidnap image. And if you can't get the kidnap image, if you can't get that one, well then there's the atonement image. And that's the most religious one. Because every Israelite would have known that image. It's what happened in the temple when the sacrifices of the lamb were made, whose blood was then poured out to take away the sins of those who had committed them. And Paul says that Jesus is that sacrifice, the ultimate one, who takes away the sin for which we ought to pay. The bottom line is that the God who has called us guilty, the God who has let us be caught by sin, perhaps even addicted by sin, the God who has watched us stray, who knows that payment needs to be made, decides to do it for us. And that is the gift of God. That is the mercy of God. That is the grace of God, revealed in Jesus, for which we are thankful, and because of which we live lives that are other-centered, so that those that we want to say, we will never talk to you again, we will never do that, you will never get back in here, we can open the doors and break the neverness and allow them to experience the forgiveness and grace not only of God, but of each of us, so that the love of God might flow through us to them.